boys, they can't drink. I'm good to. I don't know what.
All righty. Okay, folks, it's that time. So I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting of the Dunn County Executive Committee to order. Like we're all here. Approval of the minutes. I would need a motion in a second.
I would so move, Your Honor.
I'll second.
Supervisor Steen, Supervisor Morehouse, any speaking to the minutes? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Public comments. I didn't get any. Oh, all right. On to county manager's report, the fun stuff.
Start with Mike. All right, start off the county board agenda for next week. So normal starting, we have one retirement to recognize a CNA from the neighbors for 27 years. So go through that. And then we do have our audit presentation. So Kerber Rose will be joining, I believe, virtually to provide that update. Purchases over 40,000 is normal. And then we'll provide a 2026 budget update. So a lot of that will be based on takeaways from this meeting as to where we are moving forward. And then some information just related to the workshop that we'll be providing to the full board. Obviously, and then if there are any questions at that point, we can take them. Reports, DA's office, treasurer, and human resources. And then we get into the business. I was just writing the script for the video that precedes this. There's a lot. So first thing are essentially things coming out of this committee. So those will be some of the items that we go through today. So the first one is the really long version of what is the parameters resolution. So you may be familiar with that the voting for borrowing has already happened. It happened as part of the budget. This is the parameters resolution that sets how high essentially an interest rate can happen and how long that can happen. So you should see a copy of that and then some timing related to that. So once that happens, we'll move forward with the borrowing of the $3 million for highway projects that happened this year. So obviously we're near the end of the year. So the way that we do that is really just kind of trying to optimize the timing of when we do these borrows. We've typically done them earlier. Interest rates weren't great. And so we were kind of hoping that we would get a little bit better here as we moved on. This is about the latest we possibly can. And so that's why we're moved to here. So we did just receive, just side note, we did just receive our rating yesterday. And so we did maintain the AA stable that we've been at. So that's good. Next item is the ordinance amending chapter 7, section Roman numeral 5 of Dunn County ordinance related to fund balance policy, and then optionally amending chapter 5, section 517. That's an agenda item here related to, you do have a copy of that fund balance, but we'll get into that. So that's obviously optional depending on the outcome of this meeting, but on the agenda. Next one is resolution amending the supervisory district maps. Another agenda item that'll happen here. And yes, that's related to the annexation in the city of Menominee. Then we have budget amendment. So your normal budget amendments. Moving along, all of the committees were busy too. Obviously, this is a long agenda because we didn't have a board meeting last month. So you get 2 months worth of committee meetings happening. We have a rezone. The packet actually has the wrong name. It's a rezone for Witzel, not Chapik. That was carry forward of the other month. So that's actually already been updated, and the one that will go out is the full board, but same one. And then we have second reading of the human resources code. So that was the change to the wage grid and some of the other items related to that. So that's the second reading of that ordinance. And then the resolution to approve some administrative policies Those policies have been approved by the Committee of Administration. They're kind of coming through. They correspond with that ordinance change. So the ordinance removes some things and these policies kind of codify how we're going to do those things moving forward. So that's the timing of that. One of the other items in there is a policy related to budget amendments and adjustments. So that is, I would say, clarification of what has been the unwritten practice of how we manage budget amendments and adjustments. And I clarify that. You may have noticed that we've started to use the word amendment because that's the proper word. And this policy actually does adjust, make those definitions clear, and then how we go about doing them moving forward. And I should say moving forward, it's how we've always done them. It's just being written. Next one is a resolution recognizing SNAP staffing. Food-wise staffing would be the maybe the proper term, as a program provided through UW Extension that was eliminated by the federal government. The funding was eliminated by the federal government, so the program has gone away. So this is just recognizing the work that they had done over the years and the lives that they had touched. And then we have two ordinance changes from Judiciary and Law. They are essentially changing fees for different services to align with what we are allowed to statutorily and related to identifying different revenue sources that we can do. So that came from Judiciary and Law. So plenty of things to go through. Obviously, those are three of them are first readings, which don't usually take that long, but that's what we have.
Supervisor Vogel.
I just noticed it says Wednesday, September 10th on the meeting date at the top of the agenda. I've had experience with having the wrong time, so I'm always looking at that. It says September 10th, right? So,
Yes.
okay,
So that should get changed.
all right.
It's not today.
Right.
Which is
So-
good. You don't have a quorum.
Yeah.
So, yes, thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Yes, obviously the process of creating these is a copy and paste, and I very much appreciate it because it's like the first one that I've had to do, so rather not screw it up. Yep. So, all right. That is what we have for the county manager's report. If you want to announce the next item, or I can get into it.
Yeah, this is actually the real fun stuff. Budget discussion and preparation.
All right, so we shared with you a PowerPoint. I apologize for getting it out somewhat last minute, but we did want to make sure that we got you something so that we weren't hitting you with a whole bunch of information without any advance notice. But I will bring that PowerPoint up. So the budget as it is hasn't really changed too much since we last met, but we'll kind of go over some of what has. So we're gonna really what we're looking for is to gain some direction from this committee on how you would like us to approach moving forward with trying to identify a balanced budget. So we've gone over a lot of that. Obviously, we've done some of that program work that we did at the budget workshop. We received some feedback, and we have department heads working on evaluating those programs that were the takeaway of the budget workshop. And I would tell you, as I've had conversations with plenty of them as they're going through this, is they say, can I look at some other programs too? Because I think that there's some correlation between those. So we will see some of those items happening moving forward. So we're going to kind of give you an overview of where the budget sits right now, any changes that had happened in the meantime, and then go over some of the items that I think are options available to us as we look forward to identifying a balanced budget. So Changes since the last meeting, so we had included a position it was an executive position for me. That was included in the budget. It was essentially a movement of my old CIO position over to become a part-time assistant that had been denied by the Committee on Administration. So that has been removed from the budget. Now that particular position was a transfer of a person currently working on ERP. So you don't actually see a difference there, but the funding source changed because our ERP project is proposed to be funded by fund balance because we know that there's a set amount of time there, so it isn't an ongoing expense. So it does affect the bottom line as we look at using fund balance to be able to do that. Next, the highway department. So Dustin had evaluated some of his projects, and there were some opportunities that had come up for potential funding for this Highway B project that he had eliminated. So as he identifies that he may be able to get that project funded by, or portions of that project funded by the state, and he had a project in the current year that they haven't been able to get to. So looking to not overwhelm themselves next year, eliminating that project, and then it'll be a carry forward of that previous one. So that resulted in the elimination of about 966,000.
Supervisor Steen.
Yes, Dan, did he indicate when B might be done then?
Yeah, so the hope is that it would be done in 2027. So the application, I believe, is he here? Is it the end of this month that the application's due, end of next month? So put that in the application of the hopper for the state, and then they would come back with the results. So it's something that I assume we would know in early 2026 to be able to move forward with that, and then with plans of doing that in 2027.
Thank you.
Supervisor Kinnear.
Thank you. I don't know if who else to answer this, but I know when we spend less on the highway, we get less in state supports. How much does this affect that kind of thing?
Yeah, so the funding, the general transportation aid funding that we receive is based on a 5-year rolling average of how much we expend on county construction, so the construction of new highways. So this is ultimately a reduction, but I would say it probably puts us in line with where we've been in the last few years. What we do know, kind of looking back at those expenses, is to talk about a 5-year rolling average. It's 5 years ago that is what's holding us back, which was an extremely low year. That's impacting that average. So I do think that I don't want to speak for Dustin, but we are looking to probably see a bit of an increase as we drop a low year off related to that GDP.
Rough numbers is we're at like 12, 13 now, and that was about a 9-year, 8, 9, somewhere in there.
The
one that's going to be dropping off.
Yeah. Yep.
Just for we're doing pretty well, and if we can just maintain that, last will drop off, and we'll be continuing in that sort of 12, 13 general range.
Yep.
Plus or minus $1 million.
Right. So then we look at also some reduced costs related to winter maintenance, and that is essentially, we don't have to put down salt and sand when it doesn't snow. So we maintain some inventory that we'll be able to utilize moving forward. So
Got another one for you.
Yep.
Supervisor Morehouse.
I wait until he moves on to
Oh,
the
okay.
next item. My fingers were faster than
so
Good gunfight.
so the next item was that we had decreased the amount budgeted for performance related wage increases. That number was projected at 245,000, which essentially was accounting for 100% of the employees to exceed expectations at the current percentage that we had. So to kind of bring that alignment, as we've received that first round, we have an idea of where supervisor or managers were rating their employees to be able to kind of right size that number.
All right, Supervisor Morehouse.
So the data suggested that 50% exceeds expectations is more than what happened in the July round, right? So as I'm trying to understand what's going on here, because I don't.
Yeah, so once again, we had budgeted 245,000, so
Right.
we reduced that down to 145,000, which is still on the high end. I'm trying to memorize these slides. I believe we have the slide that has the pie graph. Okay,
Yeah,
so
in there
so
somewhere.
you can see, yeah, it was somewhere around like 25% of employees had that exceeds expectation. We do expect that number to go up in the next one because there are raises associated with that. It becomes a harder decision to make. And we do know that there are some managers who chose to say, you meet expectations, but these are kind of what I really want you to focus on moving forward. So we expect employees to move up and potentially get that. So part of this is definitely being cautious in the amount that we budget there. But
And so that still leaves us with 0.5%
it's
increase
still-
from
Yep.
meets expectations to exceeds.
correct.
No thinking about changing up. I mean, I have concerns about
Yeah.
it.
I would tell you that I am a fan of having a greater difference between those two. I have, it would be a big risk if we were to increase that number and have that next round turn into 75% of employees.
Even another
exceeding
0.5%.
expectation. It could happen. I am not opposed to it. I feel like there's a risk involved in doing that. I feel that we've put our managers in a position for the first time really ever to make that decision. And it's an easier decision to be made when there isn't a huge jump between positions. So I think part of that is we can ramp up to increasing that over time as managers become more comfortable in those conversations. So this is what the budget looks like with the adjustments that we had just discussed. So obviously you can see in the yellow area there is really the items that are within your control. Make that a little bit bigger. So, so you can see this fund balance ERP. This, gotta go back. Fund balance ERP, that is the number that went up with that one position change. That is the total amount of money that is set aside to run redundant systems in 2026, as well as some additional staff. There's a staff member in the finance department providing backfill. There's people doing the project management work that are on that as well as that backfill. So that's what makes up that number. The expectation is in 2027, that number would go away. And that is the justification for using fund balance to do that. That is still within your control. I have it written in here because that was kind of as we put the ERP in place, that was kind of the idea with those funds moving forward. You can see also fund balance that had been assigned to the capital improvement plan of 785,000. So those are those items there. And that's what that looks like. You can obviously see there's a ERP and DHS, and that's related to some of the backfill in that area. So this is what it looks like. We talked a little bit, and as we get into the fund balance policy, again, these are broken up into the funds that exist within the county. And I think what's important to know is in a lot of these different cases, I like to look at them based on their funds because revenues from one area can't necessarily be brought into another area in order to pay for something, right? So if you have savings in the neighbors, you can't just take their additional revenue and go put it into the general fund. There's lines around that. So as you look at certain savings, you have to kind of look at things from those different fund sides.
Well, and I think part of the conversation around that is we've been talking a lot about best practices. There were an enormous number of things that were probably not best practices 10 years ago. And I know one of Paul's big things when he was county manager was trying to bring all of those forward. He got a lot of them. We're still finding some.
Yep. So this is how we look at that. And so as you look at that, the levy that's applied here is the levy that was applied last year, with the exception of bridge petitions because they're levy exempt. And so as you look at kind of filling that in, well, sorry, it's proportionally the same that was applied last year. So that's kind of has all of the additional levy in there. You can see that all of those additional revenues fall into the general fund. Again, that area in blue is the truly discretionary funds that can be moved to any one of those columns.
Supervisor Morehouse.
I understand that you're working for more transparency, but I actually find it sort of confusing to have two enterprise funds here for budget consideration, the neighbors and transit. Why are they?
So I don't.
Why are they here?
Yeah, they really mainly so that you can see that they exist and that we're not ignoring them, but they truly don't because they aren't using any of the funds in
Exactly.
blue.
Exactly.
It's really a moot point as it relates
They
to that.
essentially pay for themselves.
Yep.
Okay.
And I think part of the reason why they're in this particular slide with the conversation we've been having is that we are talking about the fund balances for, we've got the enterprise fund balances, we have our general fund balance, we have several other things that involve fund balances. So if we're going to be talking about fund balances globally, it is useful to remember that those exist as part of a fund balance discussion.
Yep.
Supervisor Vogel.
Thank you. So did you just say that the levy amount is the current, so
It's-
it may
Yeah,
bump
so,
up?
no, so that 19,994,623 is our levy limit for 2025.
This year? Okay.
Yep.
so
Or sorry, for the 2026. Yes.
Budget.
Yeah.
And it's the same with like the sales taxes estimated.
All of those are based on the latest and greatest estimates or the information that we have
Okay, the
provided.
state aid and
Yeah.
everything.
We
Okay,
don't expect those numbers to go up.
thank you.
All right. So I just wanted to kind of break down for you as we kind of move forward. We talked a little bit about what that budget included at the budget workshop, that it does include applying the full 18% proposed increase to our health premiums as 100% covered by the county. There's another slide in here that'll kind of go into what that breakdown looks like. Currently, we don't currently cover 100% of that, but as it related to the changes in the wage increases, we wanted to start with the not increasing premiums and decreasing raises in that same year as they do directly align with each other. But I do think that is a decision point as we move forward here is that the way we would like to do that, and how do we want to move forward with that? So you can see once again by those funds what the cost looks like in each fund as you see an increase. So in general fund, and I'll probably focus a lot on the general fund as we go through these numbers, that increase to the general fund, the 2.75, is about $429,000. And then the 18% of health premiums is about 692,000, right? So that's where when you see the salary and fringe increase from year to year, we're looking at about $1.1 million of increase directly related to those two changes in the general fund. And you can see those as it moves down into the other funds as well. And then down at the bottom, just in case you wanted to do some math in your head, I gave you what 1% looks like. It's easier to kind of do that math. So once again, just a zoomed in summary of what that looks like in the general fund of an increase of $1.1 million. So I guess this is where the rubber meets the road. These are some of the changes that we can implement to be able to identify a way to balance this budget. So the first one is the pay plan. So obviously you can see what that looks like. And I think one thing that we do want to point out, as much as it is something that would go to the committee on administration, but as we kind of start with this committee and talking about what raises look like, our traditional raises have been somewhere around 4.75%. So as we go talk about making this pay plan change moving forward, part of that was the knowledge that we were going to have a tough year, right? So we have made some changes based on what has been our historical norm to even get it down to the 2.75. So I guess I would put that out, that this is something that you have as a decision point. It would certainly not be my recommendation to go lower than that. I think it would have extremely negative impacts on our workforce, and would not be a good idea moving forward. But if you did want to make a change, the 2% increase, so we used to kind of talk about that cost of living increase. So 2% is really what we would target as that cost of living increase. So that additional amount is really what we looked at as kind of the replacement of the step. So if you did want to make a change there, it's again, not a recommendation, but 2% would be kind of, I would say, the floor of how low you would want to go in order to maintain competitiveness.
Supervisor Morehouse.
Because essentially we are already cutting the pay of all of our staff.
We are reducing the raise from historical norms, which
got
is
it.
slightly different.
Which, if I were an employee, would call a pay cut.
No.
Okay, I'll listen to you.
Supervisor Steen.
Yeah, being an employee my whole life rather than employer, I'm against this. I'm against the proposed changes to the employee pay, removing the fixed steps. I feel that the county's trying to balance the budget on our employees' back. I would suggest that management manage their personnel. And I have a question: under the fixed step plan, can the supervisor make basically the same recommendations? And if they can't, is there a avenue for us to enable them to do that with some change in an ordinance or something?
So under the current ordinance, says that if the board approves steps, anyone who receives a satisfactory review would receive a step. So yes, management would have the ability to decide yes or no. That would be based on the definition of satisfactory. So I mean, if you wanted to do something like that, yeah, I would say you would want to do an ordinance change, and have pretty clear definitions about what satisfactory is.
Well, it appears to me we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater here. If the problem has been with management not correctly identifying their producers or their high producers, I would urge that we would rather than doing this, move in that direction. And the semantics or the words that you use, raises, things like that, cost of living. The step plan is the step plan. That tells you where you're gonna be. You know, if you're,
Can I get a clarification, Supervisor Steen?
fire away.
So you're suggesting firing people instead of raises?
No, I'm not.
Because the fundamental problem is we don't have the money to keep the staff that we have at that level of raise. So more or less, unless we have some fantastic, huge new source of revenue, there's gonna have to be some give in one of those directions.
Well, I'm suggesting that we look for the money elsewhere rather than doing it with our employees. That's what I'm suggesting, because all the research shows that successful companies going forward, of which the county is a company more or less, are going to be entities that offer good benefits and good pay.
Sure,
And
but the
no matter-
alternative would be to remove programs, which would have a net effect of reducing staff.
Perhaps, but we're going to reach that point anyway. And I'm not in favor of doing it on the backs of our employees. I mean, that's my opinion.
Yeah.
Whether it floats or not, that's one thing.
Yes, Supervisor
And,
Morris.
you know, semantics aside, whether it's a pay cut or not, my concern in this is the minimal differential between I'm doing my job, I meet everybody's expectations, to some of our really high performing stars. I think it's a disincentive. And it concerns me. I mean, a few years ago, probably all of us remember this kind of mass exodus for a variety of reasons of our really talented staff. I think we've done a really good job of bring really excellent people on board. And I don't know, I mean, if you look at the minimal, 0.5% pay raise that you get for doing a really, really good job, why would you, I mean, pay is only a motivator in its absence, right? But why would you do your job? I don't know.
Yeah.
It concerns me.
Back to Supervisor Steen in a second. Okay. Supervisor Steen.
Well, while we all want exceptional employees, how about the average guy? Now, is this going to be a move to, we're going to have all super producers? What about the average guy? The average person that works there, that does a good job but doesn't excel. I understand you want to reward the people that do a great job, but let's not try to morph this into a super employee, because you're going to have substandard, you're going to have standard, and you're going to have exceptional. And I don't think that you can forget the average production or the average type employee. I think we have to keep that in mind as we go forward here. Thank you.
Supervisor Frost.
I think this system's a lot better than what the step system is, because if you're 11 years, you don't get a pay increase at all so I mean, and we have a lot of 11-year employees. So basically the step program, you are 11 people, you are really gonna not make happy if you don't give them an increase. So if you give them an increase, then that's the step and that's why we had 4.75 always.
Right.
This system's a lot more fair to everybody that's been here for longer periods of time. Now, the 0.5 versus 1, that's debatable.
Yeah.
Supervisor Kinnear.
I have a question. I was listening to Supervisor Steen. His first question, it seemed to be, could you take and give everybody a 2.75% raise, eliminate the grid, and then choose to give somebody else, just let the supervisors choose, well, this person gets a 0.5. He didn't ask that me, but it sure sounded like that to me. So now I'm asking that question. Could we eliminate the grid? Say everybody's getting 2.75. No, well, that's kind of what we're doing. We're basing it on an evaluation system. Yeah. So the answer is yes to that then.
Yeah, I think in effect, an evaluation system is a way for the supervisors staff supervisors to adjudicate who gets those higher raises and who does not. So I think that
Right.
that's,
That's kind of what the question you were asking in a way, I thought, but I guess not. Now, is the evaluation system can be implemented by you? We don't need to approve an evaluation system. We only need to approve linking it to the pay. So is this a done deal already?
No,
mm-mm.
no, the second reading of the ordinance that removes the step system is at the county board next month.
Yeah, okay.
Or, sorry,
So,
next week. It's,
I have a different kind of problem with this, is that these people have had one chance to practice their evaluations. And those of you that have been involved with evaluations know they're not easy to do. What we should do, and perhaps should have done, is say, okay, we'll take a year and let these people learn how to evaluate and do it properly. Because as you read that one study, this is the most important part. If we mess up with doing the evaluations right, this will not work. So as I understand it now, I guess the only way to change implementing it immediately and delaying the actual linking would be to have an open meeting to offer an amendment or to vote it down.
So, so there's a couple of things. So the ordinance is removing, the ordinance change that's having its second reading is removing the step system. In addition to that, there is a policy that is on the agenda for next week that defines the salary, how we manage salaries. And that's going to essentially say that we have to go to the Committee on Administration. The Committee on Administration would approve a pay plan and send it forward to the full board. So probably the easier way of saying that is you can still approve the change to the ordinance that removes the pay plan. There will be another, or the steps. There will be another vote that comes to the full board that defines the pay plan, which will be what links it to this system. You could also give us a recommendation at this meeting right now to eliminate the exceeds expectations, and we wouldn't even propose it to the Committee on Administration.
So that's in the
Yeah.
packet right now that we just received that I read several times.
No,
No.
no. So the ordinance change that is going to the board
Right.
on next week removes the step system.
Right.
And then there's a policy that says the pay plan will be defined by administration and approved by the Committee on Administration and the full county board prior to the budget.
Okay,
So-
where's the policy then?
I'm
It
gonna
has-
leap in here
Yeah.
for a brief translation moment.
Oh,
So-
good.
Your proposal of not implementing, the meets expectations, to take that year and not do this part of it would be, if you wanted to just address that piece. Now, if you want to address other pieces, that's a different conversation, but if you only want to address that piece, to give it a year before we implement this, the easiest way for you to do that would be after this has been proposed to the to the Committee on Administration. And if they approve this, they would bring that back to the full board.
Full board, not this.
No, well, it'll come through here too, but on its way to the full board.
Okay,
So
yeah, gotcha.
the easiest way to do this without kind of breaking the big ordinance change that we're looking at would be to either address it at that next full board meeting after administration has looked at it, and or have a come to administration and have that conversation with administration and with, you're allowed to lobby your fellow supervisors as long as you don't have an illegal meeting.
So I would add to that as we're looking at budget recommendations from the executive committee, if you were to provide us guidance to decrease our wages by $145,000 as part of our budget proposal, we would not submit the exceeds expectations raise pay plan to the Committee on Administration because we wouldn't be able to fund it based on the guidance provided by this committee.
Gonna translate again?
Like,
I
you can
can
do
if
it
you need me
today.
to.
But we'd still have the linkage. The linkage would still be there. There just wouldn't be the exceeds.
So the
No, there
linkage,
wouldn't be any linkage because there wouldn't be any money to do this.
the linkage is still yet to be provided to the Committee on
So
Administration.
But
this
there-
does not exist, this does not exist within county resolution, policy, or ordinance yet. This is a proposal, and there is I think it's down to 100,000, but there is money in the budget to pay for this. So we could also, I would not be in favor, but we could also say, we're not going to put that money in, we're going to hold that back this year and have this implemented purely as a sorting things out, and then we will increase that pay amount next time around. I'm not saying I suggest that, but that was what Dan was.
One last thing, I am totally for this kind of evaluation system. I think it's great. I've been involved with evaluation systems, but I'm also totally for people understanding how to make it work because of our employees are our most important asset. And if we implement this immediately, I think we're going to really have some trouble. And that study I shared with you and with Diane and Kelly, perhaps, I can't remember, really emphasizes that. And I've seen some already. I'm sure you have too, some problems. But so that's my concern. I really like the evaluation system.
Okay.
But
Supervisor Morehouse, 1 second. So I would suggest that the reason that the initial proposal is for such a small bump is to implement this in a test phase relatively inexpensively. And it has been communicated to the employees that if we do it this way, we're trying to get it right. We're not going to make big adjustments yet, but we do think it is worthwhile to reward the employees that are doing better under the current system with the goal of increasing that differential further along. Supervisor Morehouse.
Yeah, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that explanation. I would really hope, however, that that is clearly communicated to our employees, because I'm not entirely sure that they understand it at that level. And then I have a question. Are you bringing a proposal to us to eliminate the exceeds expectations category altogether to save $145,000 in a $16 million budget?
No, I'm telling you that it is certainly an option at the table, and you know what that is. It is obviously not our recommendation. Our recommendation was, as we move forward, as we were projecting what this budget year would look like, we developed this pay structure in order to kind of find a happy medium between the 4.75 that we've always done and somewhere in the middle. So my I guess, recommendation there is the ability to make changes in the pay plan is within yours. As it's, even if we stayed with the step system, the decision to do steps or not is still the board's decision to be able to do that. What we feel like we did with this pay plan is give you the ability to provide that cost of living and a little bit. There was never, your options were 2.75% steps or 0. This gives a 0.5, right? It was 2.25 plus a 0.5 is what we were really looking at. So no, my recommendation is not to do that, but I did want to provide all of the numbers so that you could make any decisions that you want.
And I'm going to clarify again, all of these Dan has taken the numbers that are available to the county with the budgeting folks, with Jenna, and come up with this to say, here's something we think is reasonable. That's what we ask him to do. If we don't like that and we need to make changes, making things more expensive, making things less expensive, that's us. Supervisor Steen.
Yeah, as a member of the workforce for 62 years, I think this plan is fraught with pitfalls, abuse. What if your employer, your boss don't like you? And that happens. What happens if he likes you? What happens if you're his nephew? I think this is,
Let's get the rules.
yeah,
Yeah, the nephew part is right out.
well, in my experience,
Well,
I guess
but
I'm just
Under
sharing.
federal, under law, we're not allowed to do that, but go ahead.
Well, I just think it's fraught with pitfalls and you're opening up a can of worms and and I admittedly, I'm old and things aren't the way they were throughout my working life, but I'm sharing 62 years here and I know human interaction. So I would worry about us going forward with this. Thank you.
Supervisor Steen. Supervisor Vogel.
Thank you. So I'm looking at this and there is still a 2% grid adjustment, or is it just,
Yeah, so,
Well,
so in essence, it's 4 point?
no, no,
Okay.
no, and I think that's where we kind of decouple those, so
Okay.
we'd look at that as and I put two, it should be 2.25. We look at that, 2.25 is really what we would call that grid adjustment, so when you look at that, it's actually a 50,
point.
0.5, increase kind of within that pay grade.
Instead of the
Yeah.
2 point.
So, yeah, the mins and the max theoretically are gonna move up by about 2.25.
Okay, thank you.
okay, I'm gonna put my meeting running hat on
Yep.
here and say, are we relatively clear on what this is proposing?
Mhm.
Okay, onward.
Can I
Yeah.
add another question is, I guess, is this something you would like us to go back and find a lower number? Or are you okay in general with this as being the proposed?
My suspicion is no one is in favor of a lower number. Several people might be in favor of a higher number,
Mhm.
but we'll come back to that once
Okay.
we get through to the rest of the stuff that we don't know.
All right. Okay. Health insurance. All right, lots of numbers. So if you saw that, one of the largest increases, actually even greater than the pay plan increase, is the cost of an 18% increase to our health insurance. So that was something that had been brought up a lot as we were bringing the pay plan around to all of our employees. Is, while you're decreasing our raise, are you going to increase our premiums? Because then what happens is you essentially decrease the raise,
Mhm.
right? So that's why we put the full 18% on the county, so that we kind of were still at that 2.75% raise. Obviously, that's a big number. The 18% is a number that we receive from our insurance companies, that this is kind of the spot where you're going to need to be. We've had some bad years. We've been using our fund balance the last couple of years. When we have continual years that we're digging into fund balance, that means our premiums aren't set right, as well as the increased costs to health insurance. So that's where that number comes from. There is room there. There's room to redistribute that where employees take on some of that. Like I said, that would decrease their take-home pay. The other options are, we can look at potentially some pay plan or some plan adjustments that aren't going to be popular with employees, but it could decrease that 18%. And then, so it's really a matter of, do you want to redistribute that? Or do we want to make some plan changes to be able to decrease that 18% down to like 15? We could not do the full recommended 18, which means you're going to dig into that fund balance a little bit. This gets us into the fund balance policy. That's something that isn't necessarily regulated with us. That we talk about putting a policy in place where we say, well, we wouldn't ever go below that number. But right now, I think even if you were to do that, and what that is pretty much, it's taking risk, right? So the recommendation, the safe number is 18. You could take a little bit of risk there. And so if you want us to take a little bit of additional risk there, we can do that. But we're probably talking a 1 or 2% risk, not anything greater than that. So does this graph, I know you got this ahead of time. I provided a little bit of notes in there that ER is an employer and EE is an employee. So you can see the amount that each are covering. And in the percentage breakdown of that is different depending on the plan. So you can see, and part of that is encouraging employees to go to a certain plan. There's a greater or lesser percentage on how we do that. So the most popular plan that we have is the essentially the second one, the family one right up. Whoa, I can't hit that button. The top family one. So plan 1 family is the most popular plan that we have in the county. So what that means is for those employees, if we were to do the distribution, have them cover the 8% of that increase, that would increase their monthly premiums out of pocket by $38 a month.
Supervisor Steen, we're going to have a number of these things going forward. We'll want to come back and do our prioritization on. I don't want to have a huge discussion about the individual line items at this point. But I mean, just keep in your head, pay plan, health plan. Supervisor Steen will bring up referendum. We will certainly have that as part of our discussion. Programmatic decreases. More borrowing. There's going to have to be a give somewhere. So just as we go through this, think about where you would like to see that give happen so that we can give Dan and staff recommendations on where to look so that we will have a budget that we can bring forward. Supervisor Steen.
Yeah, I got a question. Are we our own group for healthcare?
We are self-funded, yes.
Okay. And we're self-funded. So do you have somebody administer that for us?
Yes.
What's the percentage?
What?
There are quite a few components involved in like the administrative costs that are funded each year, but we sit at around 30% administrative costs. So that would cover the cost of our third-party administrator who processes each claim, as well as our stop loss premium. So that's really like that risk insurance to protect us against large claims. And our benefits consultant, that number I do know that is 60,000 per year to have a benefits consultant. They provide the like actuarial services for us to be able to consider what premium rates should be fixed at, as well as benchmarking strategy and things like that. So I can check the number specifically as far as percentage of admin costs, but it is about 30%.
Does that include reform or not? That's not including reform.
That's not including reform. We kind of view the reform membership fees with the overall claims spend, right? Because it's care.
I guess I would be interested, that seems awfully high to me, but I don't know. I would be interested in the out-of-house administrative costs that's associated with this. Because 30% is awfully high for administration, in my estimation.
I can get some benchmarking data on that and get back to you. We do have a meeting actually tomorrow with our consultants, and they would have access to that information. So I can circle back on that.
I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
No.
Right.
That's the point. That's what we're here to have this discussion. I may disagree with you on stuff, but I will never get grumpy about you expressing your opinion. That's, or asking questions. That's part of the deal.
Okay. I'm gonna move on. I think we're good there. All right.
Fair.
All right. So new position requests that are included in the budget. So kind of included. I'll get to that. So this is the recreational deputy is something that has been included the last couple of years. You've seen that. You can see there is a state reimbursement associated with that. Does not cover the full cost of that position. It comes pretty close. And then there are additional costs related to squad cars and other equipment
Well,
related
the
to that.
maintenance of effort means that if we fund the position, we have it forever.
So there's that position. There is a dementia care specialist in ADRC that is currently a half-time position that they're looking to make that a full-time position. So currently, don't quote me on it, but I believe the individual that does that serves 2 counties, and we would be looking to absorb that individual within Dunn County. And that is covered by grants. So theoretically, no levy impact to that position. And then the final position is a hard to describe. So we talked around the FoodWise educator that had existed as part of UW Extension. As the budget had gone through, the Community Resources and Tourism Committee had amended their budget to add an additional $50,000 for a nutrition educator who would perform a lot of the same work. So it's essentially a half-time position that would perform a lot of the same work that the FoodWise educator had done. However, it wouldn't be tied down with the guardrails that the federal funding had. So that FoodWise or the nutrition educator. So example of that, the FoodWise educator could only go do some education at schools if they had over 50% of their students, or over, I think it was 50%, free and reduced lunch. That was like 2 schools in Dunn County. This position would not have those same restrictions. They could go anywhere in order to do that because it's just an educator doing that. So anyway, that was a position that's on there. It isn't actually reflected on the budget that you saw on the first slide. So that would be an increase to the general fund expenses by $50,000. So a greater deficit to the levy. So those are the new positions. I call that a position. It would be a UW system, technically a position. So it's a change to their contract. So this is where y'all talk about this.
Supervisor Prochnow.
Are we voting on keeping these or just what are we doing?
Short version, these are proposed. We are deciding whether we would be interested in adding them to the budget. Or in the case of the deputy, we'd be talking about whether we were leaving it in, which is both under the current numbers, or pulling it out for the savings. And again, for me, the maintenance of effort is the part that I find alarming. The nutrition educator, if we wanted to add that, that would be an additional ask. And the dementia specialist would essentially have no net impact on the, it's a change in the way the position, it's a change from half-time to full-time, and it would be purely grant funded on that.
It is, and that is reflected in the
Yeah,
budget. It's just
so-
the nutrition one that isn't reflected in the budget.
Does that answer? Yeah. Possible savings, no real impact, possible additional cost.
So do we need to make a decision on this right now or just later or what?
Well, we'll make a decision on it. Yeah, I mean, anyone who has a,
Well, I just don't think we can have another deputy out there.
Yeah, and if I may, you said there were additional costs in vehicles and so on associated with that recreational deputy?
Yeah, I don't know that they've been budgeted, but I know they've been talked about in the past.
I suspect two of these are fairly easy answers. I'm just gonna quick thumbs up, thumbs down here. Recreational deputy. Okay. Nutrition educator, additional cost. Okay,
May I?
absolutely.
Sharp question. Is this what the previous position, did they serve the 3 county? Two counties. Thanks, Dan.
Does Supervisor Kinnear, I'm absolutely up for having a discussion, but I felt this one was probably the easy slide, so.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed you said theoretically it's not gonna cost us much. The middle one, not gonna cost us anything. I'm just a little concerned about.
Did I say, I don't know if I did that one. I believe,
That one should be entirely.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
It is
Yeah.
entirely
Yes.
grant funded.
Okay.
Beata did a deep dive into that before we put this slide together. So yes, it would be grant funded.
Okay, does anyone object to a grant paying for something? So that's 2 thumbs down, 1 thumbs up.
All right.
Great.
All right. The great wage variance. Uh, so this is obviously something that we have talked about in the past. And what it is the difference between how much we budget for our positions versus how much we actually have as expenses. So you budget for an employee, they resign, and it takes us a month to refill that position. That is money that was budgeted that we didn't have to actually pay out, right? And so what we've done in the past is grab a percentage to say, it's not realistic for us to budget that we are going to have 100% of all of our positions filled 100% of the time. So to identify what that difference is. I joke with Jenna that our retention has been very, very good. And so we had budgeted around 3% last year. And we're not meeting that mark right. Well, we're not meeting it in the bad way right now. And so I did want to kind of bring that up. I think it's still reasonable for us to do this, but there's a matter of finding that right thing. And so I think part of this is gathering your kind of opinions around taking that risk. So some of the things that are unique to this, and this is as we get into the funds, and why that's important, right? We can apply a wage variance to the neighbors that saves us money, but we don't get that money over in this area. So that's where kind of keeping it in the funds is important. And so that is something to keep in mind as you think about wage variance and where that goes. So I did put in there, so a wage variance in the general fund, sorry, that should say a 1% wage variance in the general fund is about $245,000. So as you talk about it's theoretically, we call it an increased revenue, just in order to balance that budget. It's technically budgeting fund balance, right? But we don't ever expect to do that. But if we did actually have all of our positions filled 100% of the year, we would be going into the fund balance in order to pay that. So that is a way to kind of increase revenues in order to decrease that gap between the two. So you can see we're projecting close to that. And I think one of the things that I like to call out about this is it is a somewhat controllable value amount. Maybe not popular if we're trying to get that right, and that is as a position becomes available, we cannot fill that, and what that does is essentially it makes up for that wage variance. We can limit hiring above starting wage. So as you look at an employee who may be we still have a step system, so I can say that's at step 10, who leaves, and we hire somebody back at step 8, well, that's only a slight difference to that wage variance. If we say, we're not going to be hiring people at 8, we're going to stick to that 1 to 3, that may mean that we miss out on that person and end up getting a different person, but we could hire that person at that replacement at a lower wage, and that helps with our wage variance. And then the other component that impacts us, and as you talk about wages, is something that I should bring up as well, is equity adjustments are a thing that exists right now, that any manager can make a request to me to increase an employee's wage. Because they're a high performer, we want to keep them, right? Like, you can do that. We have to have that conversation and figure out how all of that goes. But if we were to give somebody an equity adjustment, that does impact our wage variance. So, and that's the point where I wouldn't necessarily be in favor of not doing equity adjustments mid-year. There's reasons for them, and they're very important, but those are some of the things that we can do to control that. So as we talk about potentially, budgeting fund balance there, it is a controllable item. Maybe not a popular one when it's being controlled, but it is within our controls.
A question that I assume everyone would ask. We budgeted 3%, you said, for 2025.
Yep.
What are we actually at?
1.9,
Okay,
I believe.
so about 2.
Yeah.
And do you remember what we had for 2024?
It was closer to 4. We've been bringing it down.
Yeah, it
So,
was, I think 4, and we budgeted for 2 last time, in 2024, if I'm remembering right.
Something like that.
Just
Yep.
trying to refresh the numbers. Supervisor Steen.
I'll make it quick. The bullet points on the bottom, the one in the middle, limiting hiring above the starting range. Seems to me that that's counterproductive for you wanting to have high-performing employees. Just a comment.
Supervisor Bauer.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. You want to get the best person you can, but I don't know if you want to overpay them either, if they're worth it. But I was curious if we go back to that increase, we went back to the one we were talking about earlier, that the overachieving, overachieving.
yeah.
If we go back to that, you could eliminate the equity, couldn't you? I mean, ain't that the same thing?
They're not, they are and they're not. I would argue that the exceeds expectation is a way to give greater control to managers to not get into those situations where we're asking for equity adjustments for that. Typically, when you talk about an equity adjustment, it's because an employee was looking for another job and they're trying to counter. When we get to the point that we have a high performer that's looking for another job, we've already probably failed. So that's kind of where some of that exceeds expectations is about making sure that employees are feeling that recognition throughout time, and that we're kind of ahead of the ball and not kind of being reactive to our top performers.
Anybody else? Do you want a recommendation on that now, or do you want to?
I think part of that is this something you're still comfortable with? It's something that in the past, obviously, we didn't randomly pick 3.206%. That was to close the gap, right? So it was kind of the last thing applied in order to balance the budget, as long as we felt like that was within a controllable range, right? We weren't going to approve a wage variance at 7% in order to close that gap. But I think there's, a comfortable area. And as we're looking at that, I would say 3 right now is on the high end of that. I think we look more at 1.5 to 2 being kind of that reasonable without essentially stopping every hire and waiting 4 months before filling every position and doing that to allow us to be able to do that. Because those are, as you talk about those controls, that's what ends up happening. If we're at a 0% variance at some point, like, we have to figure that out. I have to just, like, someone wants to fill the position, I'm just like, say, you got to wait 4 months. We got to build up a little bit of that reserve, right? So we want to avoid getting into those type situations and actually be able to be strategic about how we go about that.
Supervisor Morehouse.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question, if we're looking at these 3 bullet points. A delay in filling vacant positions, would that be a blanket?
No.
I mean, I guess my question is, to what extent do department heads and managers have input into that? I mean, how destructive or manageable would those be?
Yeah, so obviously, as we talk about this variance, right, it's related to levy funding, right? So grant funded positions, no point in delaying that position. We have certain positions that are really hard to fill. So we wouldn't necessarily delay those. Their delays happen naturally. And so and that's, I think, the hard thing to say. There'd be a freeze on that. That wouldn't be, in my mind, responsible. It turns into a discussion with that department head as you come in to do that. Theoretically, well, not theoretically, I still have to approve all of them currently, but that may be as I get them in, I say, all right, we're gonna have to sit down, have a meeting, talk through this position, understand what that might look like. I think we've talked in some circles just about there is some value to that in certain situations where you start to get a better feel for what that person does in a lot of cases. So sometimes it's valuable to feel a little bit of that shortfall in order to understand where somebody else can increase their skills or other cross training that we can get.
Well, and the budget, even though we are very precise and we pass a balanced budget, there's some stretch and sponge in it as it's applied. So quick thumbs up, wage variance, yes, no, and then a number. So yes. Okay, so we're at about 2%. I mean, if we're 1.9, the difference between 1.9 and 2% is what, about $25,000 at that 245,000. So 2%. There we go.
All right. Fund balance. So this is kind of what we're looking at in our fund balance. So at the end of 2024, we had $14 million is our audited number. So that's our good solid audited number. As we look at what we did in 2025, we applied 1.1 million of that to the highway. We applied 742 to the ERP. And then as you saw on that first budget in this year, we're already kind of making that assumption of applying 785 to the CIP and 248 to the ERP projects. That gives us a projected end of 2026 fund balance of 11.6 million, which aligns with about 36.4% of our expenses in the general fund. Talk fund balance policy, 35 to 50 is what we target for that number from the general fund. So that puts us right around the bottom of what our ordinance requires us to be at.
Supervisor Steen.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that the board consider changing the 35% to 30%. Thank you.
We will be discussing fund balance policy here very, very shortly. Oh, and I do want to make sure we continue the discussion as it's been going, but as you can tell, I'm gonna push a little harder than I normally do. Supervisor Kinnear.
A quick question here too. Does this 2026 fund balance projection include money that might be given back at the end of this year?
It does not.
And do you have an estimate of that?
I do. Yeah. So I guess one thing to mention just as we go forward, right, that using fund balance for operations is still bad practice. But we are looking at the neighbors is budgeting close to a $3 million profit at the end of 2026, which fund balance policy discussion, is related to how that would be managed. So, so that's like, as it is right now, that's how much we would look at getting back, at the end of 2026. End of 2025, I know that the Neighbors is also projecting a revenue, in 2025. They currently have an advance to the general fund, or an advance from the general fund, that they would be paying back, which would, in doing so, increase the unrestricted fund balance, which is what that number reflects. So we could see some changes to that in 2025. We're not making those, although we have those projections, they're not real. So we're not, you can certainly make those. I'll provide them, but these are numbers that we know that we have budgeted that are kind of controlled and put in there. The rest of them are projections. We do, I guess the other thing is, I think DHS is projecting at a positive about 200,000 at this point, which is another thing that would come back to the general fund, but could easily go the other direction.
Yeah.
So,
So,
yeah.
And that'll also be part of the fund balance discussion more broadly that we are going to be having here in a little bit. So
Yeah, if you thought you were getting out early.
there's a reason I'm pushing. Well, there's several, but
So borrowing, this might be the easier slide. I don't know. So this just provides you with our current outstanding debt, and we have been doing those perpetual $3 million highway projects. In 2026, the capital improvement project has 3.5 million for geothermal. And there has been that perpetual 3 million for highway. The current budget, as you saw it there, does not have the 3 million for highway included in that. Highway projects are not part of our CIP anymore. So that is another kind of decision point moving forward, is do you want to move forward with the $3 million borrow for highway projects? And then this, the next column over just kind of shows you what that would look like in 2028. If we were to do that highway facility project while and the renovation in 2030, we are looking at an increase to the debt service amount, which is an increase in taxes, right? So as long as we maintain that 5.3 million that you see in those two circles there, that is not a change to the tax. If that number goes up, that is an increase in property taxes. But at this point, we're kind of making a decision around 3 million for highway in 2026.
well,
which-
and it's worth noting that 2028 might as well be on another planet in terms of this discussion.
Yeah.
So
Supervisor Wilsey.
I guess I was under the understanding that if we borrowed 3 million a year, we had kind of planned on that and it wouldn't raise taxes.
So 3 million a year will
Right.
slowly bring things down. The 5.3 is where we can stay, where we don't raise taxes, but they don't slowly come down. Does that?
that's correct. Okay. Yeah.
So we do have a little room beyond that 3 million, which we're gonna need with the geothermal project. Absolutely. So if we were to borrow 3 million a year and for highway and make no other borrowing, the debt service, which is what we pay in taxes, would slowly come down a fairly small amount per year. If we borrowed at 5.3 million instead of that 3 million, then the debt service will remain approximately level and taxes for debt service will remain approximately level. I get that one right, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, debt service is the big thing, which is how much we pay on an annual basis on our debt. So if we borrow 3 million a year, right? at some point you're going to become stable, but that number is going to be less than 5.3, which means taxes would go down. And you don't get that money back, right? Like taxes, an individual person's tax bill would go down if that 5.3 goes down. It would go up if that 5.3 goes up. That is the number that directly impacts taxes.
Another way to look at it, as it has been the board's broad policy to get us back to a regular pavement replacement. The 3 million is kind of our baseline for that, which gives us an additional up to 2.3 million without having a tax increase.
Vaughn, do we want to do a thumbs? Are we good with 3?
I mean, okay.
Are you good
Oh,
with $3
are we-
million for highway?
Yeah.
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 All right, this is, I guess, as we talk about highway projects, these are still kind of that option, as Supervisor McCullough pointed out. Spend the plan in order to get on a better schedule of on replacement. This is what that looks like. Theoretically, we could cut any of these projects in order to decrease that. You do see the County B1 that I talked about already removed. And I guess maybe to speed that up a little bit, I'm gonna go back to this slide to show you if you were to apply 3 million of borrowing to the highway fund, it is currently negative 2.7. That would make it positive 300,000. So cutting another highway project would not would make that more in the positive. So
Just a question, is
Yeah,
there
the red
some,
mark.
is there a reason for the different colors on this?
yeah, so
Yellow and green?
yep, the yellow ones are ones that are done by a third party, and the green ones are the ones that are done by the county. And that's where, as you look at that, total county portion, the other thing to look at is you should only be looking at about 40. Well, the savings is 60% of that amount, because the rest of that is the staff time and other components in the green. All right, so that's why you see that 1.6 million County B project that was actually 900 some thousand dollars in savings, because that's the material cost of.
And as always with highway, it's worth remembering that if our number goes down too much, our state aids go down with it.
Mhm.
So Supervisor Vogel.
Thank you. So the first spreadsheet you had, so if the 3 million of highway borrowing isn't in there, so
Correct.
that should wipe out 3 million of the 5 that we need to make up. Is that? So now we're down to 2? Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Where were we? I went past it. There we go. Don't watch that one. I'm flicking through them, right? All right. So program reviews, and this is maybe something that we can revisit a little bit as we talk about the other ones, but this is something that I know it'll be kind of hard. So from the budget workshop, obviously you were all part of that. We identified 31 programs. Our department heads are looking at that in order to provide, where they think they can identify some savings. The total cost of those 31 is about $5 million. So they're going to be providing that information back to our kind of internal budget group. And I think there's a question of part of that is those 31 programs. There are some programs that we've already received some, hey, go look at this. There's lots of decision points to be made within that. And so I think part of that is, and as we get back to like, how much should we be looking at in closing the gap as it relates to those programs? And it's probably a hard thing to see until we start applying all the rest of these numbers to the budget. But is any thoughts on, in the end, I think the short version is, as we go through a lot of these different things, there's going to have to be some increased revenue or decreased expenses specifically in the general fund in order to get that balanced. So I guess I'm open to your thoughts and opinions on how we evaluate these programs as we get the information back from department heads. And maybe I should tell you, like, some of them I know as they're going through there say we could raise our rates for this by this much and that will save us, $40,000. But if we do that, we might have X, Y, and Z. Like there's consequences to those decisions. And I think that's a part of that where we have an internal budget group that could evaluate those and weigh those to say whether that is okay or not. Or we could bring that back to in the October meeting and say, this is what everybody has done. And we sit here we might have to provide dinner for that meeting, to discuss what those options would look like. So
Supervisor Vogel.
I had a question kind of going back because we got a performance-based budgeting like program, right? Where we put all the information in.
Mhm.
Was there anything that came out of that? Because I'm guessing it was supposed to come up with like a cost per program or per person that the program serves, or was that the problem that the number of people served didn't give us good valid information to judge a program?
yeah, that's ultimately where those numbers didn't really come in to give you a look at this, look at this, look at that. It did, but like I said, 911 was the one that they really said we should go after. And that was because it's hard to say how many people are impacted by 911. Well, it's everybody. How many people are impacted by public health? Everybody. How many are impacted by the highway? Everybody, right? When the answer to all of the programs is everybody, there's no differentiation that's provided to that.
So it provided us with some good data in terms of how things are funded and where they are. It's data on here's how you should save some money, much less good.
Yep. So really, I think a
Really
different
poor
way.
information.
Yeah. Nope. So
It is kind of, but I mean, I think it's
Right.
worth it just for the data set. I think that data set is incredibly valuable. And my thinking, I'm like, they said, we can save you this much money. I'm like,
Yeah,
I don't
no.
believe that, but I want the data and I think it's worth the spend. Supervisor Kinnear.
Yeah, thank you. So the $5,081,000 levy for those programs, we're not going to get 2.1 million out of there, or over 2 million savings out of there. So there's got to be some other kind of stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In response, or I'll do it now. Rather than lower the lake level for everybody, I would rather see programs cut. Rather than give everybody don't give them a raise, or you increase their work. That's my opinion.
I'm gonna bring in one other thing because I know Gary is going to want to talk about this. Is there any appetite for a referendum asking taxpayers to pay more?
Nope.
Anybody but Gary? Okay, Gary, I'm sorry, man,
Never
but
fly.
you're out of luck. Absolutely.
Soon as I get the bus tracks off me here, I'll be all right. No, and I'm suggesting this, and I'm not suggesting it this year or next year. Somebody much smarter than me would have to identify how we would approach that and what we'd approach it for. But I think that to pretend that that's not an option is foolish, because we are cannibalizing ourselves, all levels of government, townships, villages, cities, counties, and in the end, we don't have enough money. I think the brains that would be involved in this to craft a appointed referendum addressing a certain issue could be presented and would be with the right educational approach, good for the county. Now, like I say, I'm not the guy that can come up with this, but I'm not suggesting we just go out and have a referendum. A lot of thought has to go into this because it's the third leg of the stool for our budget limitations. Because at all levels of government, it's always, you got the spending limit, you got the revenue limits, right? You can go to referendum, but that's like a swear word. But like, I'm not suggesting that we swear, but I'm suggesting that we think about it, put some good minds to it and see what kind of stuff we come up with. Now, maybe something will happen, maybe something won't, but to not explore that and get a lot of different views on how you could approach that, I think is foolish. Maybe in the end, we don't do that, but I think it's worth consideration by all. The power of the pyramid, 1,000 people are better than one guy. So, thank you.
All right. So I will, kind of as we move forward these next couple of steps, maybe come back to this because I do have a spreadsheet where I can kind of plug in what you guys have suggested here and let you get a feel for where we fall after that, which will kind of help identify what that number kind of looks like as it relates to the programs. All right. Moving forward. Implementing a fund balance policy. So you'll see this on your on your agenda later. So there's a couple of things that so one of the things that really kind of got me going down this path of a fund balance policy was related to the Human Services Fund. The Human Services Fund back in 2018 had a deficit of close to $800,000. Since then, they have given back to the general fund like 1.2 million, 1.1 million, 400,000, 600,000, 1.7 million. So there's been a lot of big years of giving money back to the fund. So as I look at that, and we talked about it a little bit at the Highway Committee this morning, is too many years of doing that. What it's showing me is that they're budgeting in a very conservative manner in order to handle anomalies that may happen. The one that comes out most is the out-of-home placements or out of
$400,000 a year for a single
Right.
person.
that can happen. So as much as those are things that we have to pay, I think that question comes in is, should we be budgeting for that to happen? And there's fluctuation of costs, and human services is a great example of that they don't know what their clientele is going to be like in this year. And one or two people can really throw those numbers off. And it has been the practice of the county to take any proceeds from the Human Services Fund and put them back into the general fund. And I will tell you that I looked that up and I have no idea why. I can only find a resolution to the contrary. But that's been the practice. And I did call Chris about it because then I asked her, do you know anything? She's like, no, that's just the way we've always done it. So, so,
Oh, great.
so,
Makes me feel really good.
so anyway, where this comes from is I recognize that having created a budget, if you've ever created a budget, like you don't want to go over budget. Nobody wants to. But there's anomalies specifically within that budget that happen. And the highway budget is another one that, you could have a road get washed. That's maybe emergency funds, but you could have a bad winter, right? That impacts the way that your budget is. And that's okay. And that is why we have fund balances, to be able to handle those anomalies, build that back up. And when you have a bad year, you dip into it and you build that back up and do that. So the idea behind this is if we were to implement a fund balance policy on all of these funds, that enables the managers that have been creating their budgets in a way to protect against that bad year, to make a decrease to their budget and recognize that we have a policy in place that recognizes that if I go bad in a bad year, that that's okay. And we'll just build that back up in order to move forward. So I feel like that's a way that we can decrease our operational budget and handle those anomalies by providing a little bit of a cushion in the fund balance when those bad years happen.
Well, and I mean, it really is a best practice too, because instead of saying, budgeting here and doing the dips, you're budgeting with the intent that it'll be a fairly smooth line, and your fund balance gives your managers the guardrails to say, no, my budget really looks more like this. Supervisor Morehouse.
Yeah, this is the dumb question because I'm not smart enough. So are you suggesting that any overage in the human services budget, which may or may not ever happen, that those funds would not revert to the general fund, but would revert to the human services fund?
Yeah, so they would
To a
stay in the
point.
human services fund until they got to a certain amount. So the policy the printed policy that
Yeah.
I provided to you there looks at about 13% of their expenses,
Right.
which in short, in that particular case, amounts to, it's like close to like $1.4 million that they would be able to hold in a budget,
In the
which should be plenty to be able to handle a bad year of out-of-home placements and build that back up.
Okay,
Well,
thank you.
I'll note from highway, must have been about 2015, 2016. It would have been later. Anyway, because we were essentially using highway as a piggy bank, the fund balance was getting drawn down. And so we had, I think, a $1.2 million snow removal year as opposed to our normal at that point, 525 to 750. And so we ended up making that whole from the general fund. Whereas if we had had an appropriate fund balance policy and had been following it, we wouldn't have needed to pull those funds out of the general fund because they would have already been sitting in an appropriate fund at highway.
Yeah,
Yep.
and we did that to the prior neighbors when this was still,
Yeah.
as every year, if they had excess money, what's an enterprise fund? And they emptied it completely. So when it needed a new roof, they came, they looked at I was on the committee at the time, well, where are you gonna get the money to put in the roof? Well, and I remember one of the people in that committee said, the county stole it from us over the last 10 years. We would have had
Yeah.
the roof paid
Yeah.
for.
Yeah, and so this is graphs that I put together thinking that I was gonna have to explain them, but so this top one is really what it looks like if you don't have a fund balance in order to do this. So the blue line is the budgeted line and the orange line is your actual. So both of these graphs use the same actuals. So what happened here is this orange line happened, right? A bad year. The next year, we adjusted our budget for that bad year. We moved forward, we had another almost bad year. So wait a minute, we got to do something about that. And now we get to the point that we're budgeting $200,000 and $300,000. This is just complete make-believe numbers, right? But you have this big gap between how much you're budgeting and how much you're expending. In this particular one, that blue line stays on it's increasing at 3% on an annual basis. And you have the highs and the lows, and down here reflects that fund balance, kind of balancing that out. So it allows us to level out the amount that we're budgeting and providing in levy. And you'll see the gap between the blue and the orange here doesn't span quite out as much, so.
And I'll note, so as part of this ongoing discussion about best practices, there are a couple of other places where budgeting wise, we should be doing things slightly different. Some of those may allow us a little bit more grace this year than we thought maybe we would have, not a lot, but might make that $2 million a little more painful, a little less painful. But it would be basically one time, because once we've made that adjustment into the budget, it won't be there to do that again.
Right.
Essentially with administrative costs.
Right. So that's, yeah.
Supervisor Bauer.
is there gonna be a cost to somebody keeping track of all of these funds and balances? I mean, up and down and where they're all going? Is it?
They're in our audit every year. They already do it. It's just a matter of saying that when we do it with that general fund, right? That 35%. So that's really all we're talking about is like from a human services standpoint, they're going to be between 7 and 13%. So if they get under 7, then it may make sense in order to increase their budget a little bit in order to get that fund balance back in order. Whereas if they go over, then the board could say, nope, you're at 16%. We're taking that 200,000, we're putting into the general fund. And you need to adjust your budget because whatever you're doing is is providing too much money to your
And this is not gonna hurt the general fund? I mean,
So, I mean, you won't see the fluctuations to the general fund, right? You're not going to see that money coming in, so you're really kind of holding that there, but it isn't going to subtract from the general fund.
Well, and it's worth noting that so all of the other, so basically what we're talking about is moving cells around on a spreadsheet in terms of it, because it's all the county's money.
Yeah.
It's just how you're tracking it. That administratively, that's relatively simple. In terms of impact on the general fund, so if we're at 5% of, anyway, once any individual fund balance is filled up to the recommended fund balance per policy, then the rest of that, any overages will move into the general fund. So there will be some, as we're getting all of those funds built in place, there will be some drop to the revenue coming into the general fund. But one would hope that we have a couple of, that once that adjustment has been made, those overages will be coming back in. Does that answer your question?
yes, it does. What happens if there's a county catastrophe? Can we draw them funds back out and use them as we need? Or they stay in that department?
So as we look at fund balances, though, we monitor them on a kind of an ongoing basis. It's actually really hard for us to monitor them in SAP, but going forward, we'll be able to monitor them. When you talk about that, that's really a cash question. And so the general fund and even a lot of these funds are all what we would consider governmental funds. So it's all one kind of pocket of money. So if we needed cash availability, we have to a point, and Lynn is over there, so there's a point, right? We try to hold a certain percentage of liquid cash available to us at any time to be able to handle those types of situations. But yes, short version is yes, that money is available.
The other sort of informing bit for that is the fund balance policy will be set. Staff will make recommendations. This is what we think you should do. We collectively will make those decisions. If we suddenly need to change that, the board is certainly capable of doing that. That's fully, this is one of the reasons why we've been talking about writing it into policy as opposed to into ordinance. We went with ordinance for the general fund initially because we didn't have a great system for tracking policy. One of the things that Dan has been doing is getting us a much better system for tracking policy. So one of the things I wanted to bring to all of you, so Dan was like, which one of these options? And that was clearly a policy question for this group and for the board more broadly, is which way do we do this? And, we can just repeal the ordinance and make a fund balance policy. We can repeal the ordinance and create an ordinance that says, we will have fund balance policies, and this is where they will be, and this is how it will be done. There are multiple choices for how exactly to do that, but I think probably the logical one is repeal the ordinance and say, and this is now where all of that information is going to be. That information will be, those balances will be suggested by staff, reviewed by admin, and ultimately the board. Well, at appropriate committees.
Yep. All right. Next steps. All right, I'm gonna exit out of this slide. stop sharing and go to the interactive mode of editing a spreadsheet, because everybody loves to edit a spreadsheet.
Nothing more fun than a
Uh,
spreadsheet.
So, all right, so this is the active version of the same spreadsheet that you had seen before, that I put some additional spaces in here for us to kind of fill in the blanks. So we talked about $3 million for highway. Did I get enough zeros in there? Right, so that's what that change looks like if you do that. So you can see highway is actually in the black at 234. If you did that, right, that allows us to move these items in the blue, so you could reduce the, sorry, Dustin, I said it out loud.
Teeny bit bigger.
Yep. Yeah. Plus sign. That was too big, right there.
He's gonna change it.
Yep. Yep. All right. So yeah, so you can see there, that's 234 for the highway. Which would allow you to kind of decrease that levy and move that to another area, because where this top levy number comes in is at 19,994 is the number that we can't change. Now you start changing that levy amount that's applied to highway, like, we don't always give that money back. So Randy's over here giving me the side eye as I even said it out loud.
Supervisor Proctor.
Well, there's only so much you can take out of there because we put the
Yeah.
vehicle registration fee in there. And I can't remember what that number was, but what,
That's right here.
3.7?
So
I know, but we can't lower our levy because we put that in effect. So whatever our levy was when we put that in effect, we cannot lower it below that. So just
so,
remember that.
Yeah.
I don't know what
I-
that number was, but like
I
3.
guarantee it's a much lower number, but
3.7 or 3.8.
yeah. So, and obviously the other thing that can be talked about here, right, is when we say borrow $3 million, we could borrow 2765069, right? A round number. Theoretically, you could borrow 3 because there's administrative cost to that could come out of the 3 in order to do that. So, so then we talked a little bit around wage variance. So I can apply. So we talked about 2% wage variance. So that'll kind of fill in what that looks like.
I think for purposes of discussion, we probably want to leave the highway at 3 million.
Right.
It's painful enough as it is.
Yeah. So anyway, when we make those changes, that's where we sit, still down 2 million. We have, this was where I was putting in, if you wanted to do different changes to the wages, you could do that. There's other reductions and, oh yeah. You gotta remember how much that was.
77,000.
Yeah, there's a
They-
difference
the request
between
was
those
like
two.
102, I think, 102.
Yeah,
Minus the 77 theoretically
Yeah,
recoup.
yeah, exactly.
Plus the cost of a squad.
I'm gonna go with
Yeah, whatever that
30,000.
is.
So short version is that still puts you in a spot. And so that's where, as we look at reductions, 1.3 million is there one, there's not 1.3 million in the 31 programs that we had. Right? There's just not. Well, there is.
Not leaving them intact.
Right. So I think that's, as you start to look at some of those other changes, that's where we get into, what are our options?
So like the administrative costs, best practices discussion might net us some. Dan, you have a number you would care to attach to that?
No. Uh, so there is an thing called indirect costs. So if you've ever dealt with grants, you're familiar with those. And what that is for all of the grants or different things that happen. So we talk a lot about a position is grant funded. Well, that position is the person's wages are grant funded, but they have a boss and their boss has a boss, and there's a finance department that oversees all of the work that they do. There's an IT
Base
department
needs,
that oversees it. There's the facilities costs, there's the finance costs, all of those other costs, which that we would call an indirect cost, which are in some cases recouped as part of the charges that departments make or as part of their grants. Medicaid is one that actually does reimburse for indirect costs. We do not charge those departments that receive indirect costs for the actual costs. So as you look at, there's some exceptions around the finance people as it relates to some of these other funds. But for the most part, in the general fund, all of your administrative costs, all of your finance costs, IT costs, human resources costs, facilities costs, they all live inside of the general fund. Even though those costs are essentially a portion of Carmen's not here, so I don't get to say sorry to her, right? The neighbors, right? The neighbors does not pay for specifically pay for the IT staff that support the neighbors. So is there a way that we can identify the portion of those staff costs and apply those costs to other areas? Right? Specifically looking at your enterprise funds for those things, because they're receiving other revenues, and that becomes shifting. Instead of paying for this employee's salary with levy, we would be paying for it with some other reimbursable fee.
And Dan and I have been talking about this a lot. One of the things that I find a more convincing argument than the effective budgetary, it's moving money around internally. It's all the county's money. I'm not entirely. Budgetarily, it's a savings. I find that argument much less convincing than we should be tracking these costs appropriately. Best practices mean we should be doing this. This is like when a couple of years into my highway stuff, highway started costing, facilities was doing for something for highway and vice versa. And internally making sure all of the costs were going to the unit that was incurring them. Because in terms of expectations for your managers and in terms of financial audit to see that you're using your money appropriately and that everything is being billed appropriately, it's a better practice to do it that way. The fact that it will also make this a slightly less painful process, I think is a benefit, but I think the big benefit of this discussion of changing that is that it moves us in line with better financial practice. Supervisor Kinnear, Supervisor Headland, then Supervisor Kinnear.
Oh, okay. I know that some of the grants, like you were saying, Medicaid, have a cost, administrative cost. Are we, or do we know, or do we track, are we all charging the max that we can? I know not everyone has it, but some funds do. And that was one thing we found in balancing West Cap's budget, was that they were about 2/3 charging a lot of these funds only, instead of, what they could have been charging them. And so, that made quite a difference in there, but again, I realize there's different sources don't have that.
I believe the answer is we are charging the appropriate amount externally. It is the internal allocation of those funds that where the charges are not appearing probably in the way they ought to. Supervisor Kinnear.
Well, that's kind of what I had the question on. For example, the ENS department, when I look at the budget, don't we pay for IT, or doesn't that department pay separately for IT and those costs are spread out? Is that what you're talking about right
So
now?
you see some IT costs within your budget. Those are the direct costs that they have. So those costs are to pay for a license to have an email account or to have access to a computer or different things like that. There is the entire IT department, the staff costs of having an IT department that is not shared anywhere else. Same with the human resources department or the finance department. Right?
And for example, we have a larger IT department than we would if we did not have those enterprise funds.
Correct.
How would that save us money?
So you would kind of you
Save
kind
that
you
in the budget.
yeah it doesn't
Actually save us.
well so what it would do is you kind of alluded to this before of the neighbors projecting the neighbors fund balance, right? Like they're projecting a revenue, so that's going to come back to the general fund. If we increase their expenses because they're paying some of those administrative fees, it decreases their profit. So it's kind of doing the same thing, but it's actually kind of putting that cost specifically in the budget.
I think probably the easiest way to think about it in terms of solving our we have to have a balanced budget problem is you're time shifting the costs. So instead of at the end of the year, finding out how much is left over, putting that in the general fund, using that for ongoing. This is why I said it's a one-time savings. Instead of doing that, we're billing those costs, which we would otherwise recoup as a general fund. We're billing those costs up front as part of the budget. So it saves us ultimately it saves us no money at all. In terms of this year's balanced budget, it makes a difference, and it's best accounting practice.
So here's a little bit of what this would kind of look like, right? So if we just say, and I'm pulling this number out of a hat, right? $800,000 of additional revenue to the general fund. That is an expense to need to make that an expense. So it's an increase here, right? So now that put the name, did I get that number right? Oh yeah, because you got a wage variance applied, right? So that became an expense in the neighbors, right? So we lowered this number, we increased this number, but what we know about this number right here is there's actually a $3 million profit built into those expenses. It's shifting the money from one fund to another because of the revenue source.
And it's shifting when we look at it.
Yeah.
It's not just, it's not just legally, it actually puts us
You're on
in
video.
right.
in a
Yeah.
better, better position in
Right.
regards to audit and
Yeah.
audit trail and proper accounting of funds.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, but as Supervisor McCullough pointed out, right, like that's kind of a 1-year fix in how you do that. Now, obviously, if you move some of those expenses over to the neighbors, that's something where they do control their fees to a point in order to generate that revenue. Because one of the problems with the general fund is that our revenues increase by net new construction, the revenues in the neighbors or other grant funded areas are not necessarily limited by that same amount. So when you shift those salary costs over to something that has a more controllable revenue source, you do have a little bit more of a long range or longer term controls over that.
Well, and this is sort of, so all of you who were here at the time will remember and we had $1 million explosion in HHS. And then the next year we had $1 million explosion in our enterprise fund. And then we had the $1 million, and we had that series of $1 million holes. This is, as we were, and that was part of why Paul was so, we've got to get into best practices. There's stuff that is left over because it's always been done that way that's problematic. This would be the rare occurrence where we've found something that we were probably not doing right that's the opposite of $1 million hole. But again, like those $1 million holes, it's a one-time opportunity.
So once again, so that's something that we can pursue though. And I've challenged myself to go out and get the recording of this meeting from the last 2 years where we said, well, that solves it for next year. And we have to make sure that we keep moving forward on it for future years. That doesn't solve the fact that whatever is left over in that general fund, as you apply raises to that next year, you're going to have that same issue. So there is still an issue as it relates to the program array and the costs associated with it.
Essentially we have a structural operating deficit. We have an opportunity to apply some one-time money. And like I said, I was not expecting a rabbit this year. And this is only like, half a rabbit. But we have to address some of those structural costs because it's unsustainable. I don't like that answer at all, but we are at an unsustainable point. If we're very lucky, solar will make a dent in that, but
we don't know when.
yeah.
Yeah. And federal subsidy cuts and.
Supervisor Prochnow.
So if you did that, how much is that gonna help this 2 million plus problem?
I was just kind of playing around with it, right? As we look at that, so we have some reports that go through and look at these things that we use for those, as we ask people to pay us for our indirect costs, we actually have to provide a justification for how those exist. So we have some of that. I think we can probably get close to $1 million in the general fund.
Okay.
It would distribute some things into, I guess that's a question, like where do you want to distribute that back? Because that you could give it just to the neighbors as I did in this example here, but doing that that's purely taking advantage of the fact that the neighbors is in a good financial spot right now, right? As you talk about those indirect costs, there is human services gets money for indirect costs. The highway department, I believe, charges for indirect costs. Transit, Austin, I was calling out people. As you look at those different areas, those are all other areas that theoretically could.
Okay, so.
Yeah.
Back to the 31 programs, you had like 5 million. Do you think you can cut 10%? So I mean, is that like 500,000 or do you think you can only cut 3%? Or, I mean, seems like 10% would be easy. Or, I mean, not easy, but it would be somewhat possible.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly
We can
places out there. I mean,
we can make that ask.
Yeah.
I mean, that's.
But I mean, you get 500,000 there and 1 million there and 500,000 fund balance and it's missing out, somewhat, whatever.
So I think what I would say is from an administrative standpoint, we'll compile those numbers. We'll kind of see what those look like and come back in October. So we'll target that 500 and we'll kind of look at what we get back from department heads and we'll say, okay, let's see if we can try and 500. Now, I know that once again, we're going to get that, well, you could cut a position, it would save you, $100,000. This will be the consequence. So I think that's kind of what we would be bringing back to you is here's some of those options to be able to do, which in short is Supervisor Kinnear's point. I mean, you have to start looking at those programs and do you want to cut this program or do you want to, cut one staff member so that two staff members have to do the work of three, right? And those are kind of those decision points that you would have at that October meeting, which, by the way, you have to do it at that October meeting. So, so I think you have options of maybe we need to do another meeting prior to that October meeting. If you want to go through that, that's an option that we have on the table. But I think, yeah, we can look at 500,000, but I mean, I would say be prepared for some difficult decisions.
Will we have an opportunity to look at that stuff instead of facing everything in front of
Yes.
us?
Yeah.
With
Yeah.
immediate
So,
impact.
so the department heads that had one of those 31 programs have been working on that. We gave them a due date of September 18th, which is next Thursday, to be able to provide that. I know plenty of them have been working on that, as they've been in contact with me. I just had a conversation with one of them today that said, yes, you should write this as if it is going to go to the board or at least the executive committee. So those will be kind of written in that way. But I think we will, from an internal budget group standpoint, I think we'll grab those and we'll look at that. And if, inevitably what you're going to have some people say there's nothing you can do. And then there's going to be some people say, well, you could do this or you could do this. It was not a good idea. And I think that's kind of what we want is more of these are your options and here's the consequences. So we may have to take some of that and have people kind of do some rework so that we have everybody on the same page about how we do that. So short version, I think I could say we could get that to you the week after the 18th, trying to do math in my head, whatever number that comes out to. Like, give me that Friday of the next week. And we can get that information to you. And then I think another meeting is that.
So Supervisor Vogel, I'm gonna throw one thing in. Once you have that information, do you want to plan on the October meeting? Would you like to have a poll that goes out with it, with that saying, there's enough here that I would like to have a special meeting? I'm absolutely fine with, we just do it in October, but if people feel that they need more time to have that discussion, given that it's gonna be not at all fun, do you want the option of saying, I think we're gonna need another meeting? Or do you want to just go for October? So
Mike,
October, thumbs up.
I think maybe we do. I think we should be.
Anybody hate just going with October?
Can I
One.
clarify
Sure.
one thing with the back of the room there? Andrew, what is our absolute newspaper deadline?
Turn it up.
So
What? Do we want to move our October meeting forward 1 week so that if we do not come to a reasonable consensus,
good
we have
idea.
space?
Yeah, I'm with that.
That makes.
Okay,
That makes
so let's
perfect
go
sense.
ahead and move exec up 1 week. And that'll give us the chance to have that conversation. And if it blows up,
We can have a
chance to
special
have a
meeting.
second meeting. Yeah.
it's my anniversary.
I
It's like my
apologize.
payback for.
Okay. So Ann, you were Supervisor Vogel.
Thank you. I was at the budget workshop And I'm not sure how thorough the decision-making was, like deciding on those 31 programs. So I don't know if there's any voluntary looking at programs that, because maybe people have opportunities and versus just those 31, because I'm not, yeah.
So I will certainly send out an email to department heads and I guess this would be I can send that out to say, if you have ideas, options within your area,
Better choice.
please provide them. Or if there are areas that you really want us to ask, we can do that.
And one more general point in this area. So this was this budget cycle. One of the things that I am going to ask all of you to do for the next budget cycle is to start having these conversations as soon as we have a budget. So that you and the staff members associated with your committee have time to really think about it for next year, because next year is going to be a hard year too. And I would like to be having, I absolutely, this has been, I think, a good process, but concerns people have raised that these discussions should have been happening in the standing committees in advance. I am cognizant of that. I think that's correct. I think that's important. I think that that's going to be part of next year's charge for all the committees, starting with January meetings.
And I would add to that, and I've had some conversations specifically with Supervisor Prochnow, but yeah, I think there is a component of that is to be well informed as you go through that. So I was planning on putting on a future agenda for this meeting of what do you want from a data standpoint, as you move forward with that. So some of you are maybe aware of this. The example is approval of vouchers. So in the Human Services Department, you approve the vouchers.
No, we
Review.
review
Review.
the vouchers.
In highway, they approve them.
Mhm.
Yeah, in highway, they approve them. Do you look at them in the neighbors? You accept them in the neighbors, and the Committee on Administration sees them for every other department. So there are committees out there that aren't seeing the month to month, like where's that money being spent? So that's some of those changes like that. So if there's things like that, as you go through that, say, this is the type of information that I'd like to see on a monthly basis. That's just one example. Let us know, because we can, and I say, well, I'll put that on an agenda. We can kind of talk through what are those things that you'll want, so that you can see those things and be more aware of what's happening.
Supervisor Morehouse.
Yeah, I've already planned to do that in Health and Human Services, and I mean, I think the process of the priority budgeting was deeply flawed, but the inventory itself of programs, I think, is very useful. So Health and Human Services is going to start looking at those, we'll sort of divide it up, but look at them at every single meeting. And so we have a better sense of what those programs are and how they're funded and what the implications are.
Well, and I would note that at least 50% of the purpose of the process of that meeting was to lodge in people's heads that we have to make these decisions. Part of it was to identify at a surface level places where we think there can be savings, but a huge part of that was to make the board really think about that prioritization process.
And
Supervisor Kinnear.
I was brain dead for a moment evidently, but so we said October 1st and everybody else can make it, as I can't. Unless it was delayed, like 5:30 or something. I'd be in southern Wisconsin. I won't be able to make it back by 3:30, but I don't want to make it bad for everybody else in the committee. I'd very much like to be here, but I can't.
Anyone object to moving it to 5:30? I mean, it means we're going to be hitting our heads against the wall till pretty late, but.
That's right around mealtime here.
Yeah, Dan's gonna buy.
Okay, okay.
I am confident that
Or
that my budget can be stretched to paying for
Right.
sandwiches or
Right.
something.
Or another.
I was
day-
thinking
or
it's-
Another day,
I'll bring food, but you
Or
don't get
another
it till
day.
you get to two hundred and
another
fifty
day.
thousand.
October 1st is a Tuesday, Wednesday?
Yeah, that's a Wednesday, yeah.
So,
A Thursday instead.
What about Thursday? The second? No, you
Mm.
can't.
Oh, so if you haven't.
go ahead, what Randy,
No, I just.
just,
No, that's fine. I'm just, there's 5:30 is fine.
There's no standing committee meetings on October 2nd.
Well, here I go again. I got a commitment to be up at the airport in the evening that night.
October 2nd doesn't work for me.
Yeah, okay. So,
okay, let's go with
thanks.
October 1st, 5:30.
Okay.
And I could help with the food.
Well,
'Cause I'll be
mean,
hungry.
When I say
Help
my
with the
budget, I'm
food.
referring to the budget for,
Yeah.
meetings. I'm not like referring to my wallet.
We could all chip in a little.
I was
bit,
thinking
guys. Wouldn't
pizza.
hurt us.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it, everybody.
On the 1st.
Yeah.
Okay,
On the first, yeah, everything,
5:30 on the 1st.
okay.
It'll be gangs of fun. Okay, so Dan has his 500,000. We'll have to come back and have some other discussions, but I am now going to bring us back to the discussion about wages and French. Do we want to leave them at the proposed wage change and the 18%? Or do we have some appetite for changing those, or do we not want to have that discussion until we get the final numbers with the 500,000?
No appetite for change.
None of it.
No, no.
All right, so
You're saying.
You
not
want some?
change.
he wants up. So
I'd like.
leave them alone until the October meeting.
Okay.
Great, that'll give us one more thing to take us into the night. Dan, is there anything else you need from us in terms of recommendations? I am absolutely willing to twist arms and,
No, that's what I needed to know. So.
all right, we have an agenda here somewhere. Okay. So that's it for budget unless anyone else has. Okay. 7, reports, resolutions, and ordinances to the county board from the executive committee. Resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of not to exceed $3 million general obligation promissory notes, series 2025A. I would need a motion and a second.
So move.
Supervisor Steen, Supervisor Prochnow. Are there any clarifying questions? This is one of those things where, there's not a lot we can do with these except yes, no. So clarifying questions. All right, first call for debate. Second call for debate. We are ready to vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Great. B, ordinance amending chapter 7, section 5, section V, I guess, of Dunn County ordinances, fund balance policy. And optionally an ordinance amending chapter 5, section 5.17.
Can I explain?
Please
Aye.
do.
So obviously that's agenda kind of weird. In that staff report, you had 3 options. Option number 1 is to essentially remove the fund balance policy from chapter 7.
Right.
Option number 2 is remove the fund balance from 7 and add a statement in chapter 5, which is the county manager one that essentially says you are required to have a fund balance policy that will be approved by the board. Do you want to?
For this explanation, could you go onto the county website and put up the ordinances?
Sure can.
That's one of the easiest spots to find, and while you're referring to those, we could see it.
Yeah, so fundamentally, because that was the best tool the time in 2023, we put our general fund balance into policy into ordinance. Now we have a better way of tracking policies. We can create an ordinance saying there must be a fund balance policy. And this is one of those where Dan was like, and since we are coming back to the board 2 years later to say, hey, we want to repeal this, we want a solid rationale for why we're going to do it the way we're going to do it, and to pick one of those three options.
Good, you just show the page that shows all the ordinances.
Oh.
You had it
gotcha,
right off the bat.
gotcha. All right, that's the all you were talking
Yeah,
about.
because we're
Okay.
talking about 5 and 7, and
Yeah,
and if you
yeah.
just made it a little bit bigger, we could. Okay, thank you. This just helps me understand with the explanation and,
Yep.
okay.
So, yeah, so my preferred solution is in chapter 7 that we just eliminate V, which is the fund balance policy. If you look at the sample that you have here, it is word for word. Most of that stuff is word for word what is in here. There's been additions to that. And like I say, that's just kind of written in policy there. So to remove that. And then the next option then is to say, all right, let's go into the county managers, and there is a fiscal reports and planning that we would add an item to this that says that I am required to create a fund balance policy that will be approved by the county board. So that second option is really making sure that you at least have an ordinance that we will always have one of these. And specifying that it goes to, that the county board is the approver of that policy.
Supervisor Steen.
I so move.
Well,
Oh,
We don't,
Good.
what,
yeah. Yeah, and the third option, which you can tell me, but you can't really approve it because we would have to rewrite chapter 7, section 5 to include this whole thing, and this is not done yet. So,
I take it back.
okay, so does anyone have any appetite for item C? That would be the, okay, great. So we're choosing between repeal and then create the resolution and all of those policies, which will still be appealed by still be taken by the board. Or do you want an ordinance directing Dan to do the thing that will be in policy? So A is just repeal and fix with resolution. B is repeal, create another ordinance and fix with resolution. A, thumbs up. That's, I believe, Dan's preferred choice.
I think that would be mine.
With no discussion on them?
I'm just, this is just a quick idea, because
Oh.
we don't have a motion on the floor.
Right, that's why I was wondering why we're doing this.
I just wanted to get,
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
because we're gonna need a motion to do one of those things, and if there's a clear majority for one, then I'm gonna ask a motion for that, and a second for that, and then discuss it. If there's no clear majority, then since this is a smaller committee, we'll have a discussion before having a motion. Repeal and deal within resolution, with the policy.
Policy.
Oh, so first, Dan's recommendation, which is repeal and do with proposal, is that broadly what we want to talk about?
Yeah.
Okay, then I would need a motion and a second for that.
No.
Supervisor Wilsey?
Mike,
Oh, sorry.
sorry.
For option A?
Option 1, that's on here.
Oh, yeah, perfect. And I need a second.
I'll second.
Supervisor Morehouse seconds. Clarifying questions. For the difference between the two.
So there's no. Annually or.
So and Dan can correct me if I'm wrong. The idea would be we would pull the ordinance with the expectation that as we pulled the ordinance, we would have the policy set with all of the fund balances. And that would just be the policy of the county going forward. But we could certainly put in a review clause, or at any time, the appropriate committee for that particular fund balance would certainly be able to come to the county board and say, hey, we think that, we need to change the policy on this. So there would be a front end time frame, which would be having the policy set up and pulling this ordinance and putting the policy in place. And then theoretically, the policy will be so brilliantly written that we will never have to revisit it, but we will certainly have the option to revisit it at any time. Does that answer your question?
So the intent would be that the policy would be adopted at the same meeting as the second reading of the ordinance change, so in October. And it would be essentially this policy that you have here, and we by default schedule a review of those policies on a 10-year, well, this one's set to 5 years, where we would review that internally, and we would identify the executive committee as the committee in charge of this particular policy. So
Clarifying question.
Absolutely.
So right now I can go on here if I'm a constituent or one of us, I can go on to there and I can look and I can say financial management or creating a county manager and I can see it. If we do number one, will those be gone? So we'll have to go look at policy somewhere and find it in the county website?
yeah, number one and number two will make it so that they are not here, as it is a more internal facing document. There's certainly, I mean, if there's items that you want, we can share some of those policies. There's some policies that we don't like to necessarily, obviously, they're all public records, but we don't want people to know the inner workings of how we manage our finances because they might have
Okay,
bad
I,
ideas, so.
okay, but this number, option 2 says amend chapter 5, so wouldn't chapter 5 still be there?
Yeah, so chapter 5 would be there, but the terminology, and I think that ordinance was included in the
Yeah,
packet.
yeah, right.
It just says that I have to create one.
Right, so if I was a constituent, I could go to that and say, chapter 5, okay, I'm looking for this, I could find it easily. See, that's my point. In the clarification, I want to be able to find stuff, and well, I tell you, I went on there today and I found stuff that I needed right away. If I'm looking for public policy, it's much more difficult, although way easier now than it was 5 years ago. So that's my point is all. I just wanted number 2 so that people can access it and see it and not say, hey, I don't know how to find the information.
I think that makes sense. And I think what I would maybe recommend there is there are likely some policies that we should have available because they do kind of impact. And that's what like this is an internal policy. It's how we act, but there's certainly value to the outside understanding what those rules and regulations are. And I would argue there's probably a place for that on our website for policies that aren't ordinances that the public can be able to see.
Okay, I'm gonna put on my public meeting notices hat and suggest that what we should do is add an item to a future exec, not October, to have a discussion about a public facing policies space. So there are policies that should be public facing, there are policies that should be internal. It absolutely should be easy to do that, but that's a discussion under the agenda that we really can't have in depth. But would that address? Yeah. Okay, so we will come back to that at a future time when it's on the agenda. Okay, so any more clarifying questions? Any speaking to the motion? Supervisor Kinnear, does that answer your? Great. Second bite at the debate apple. Okay, we are ready to vote. All in favor of the item option 1? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. We are set. Resolution amending the county supervisory district maps. I think this is pretty straightforward, but I would entertain a motion and a second. Supervisor Kinnear, Supervisor Morehouse.
I'm sorry, Randy.
Oh, I'm sorry. Have I skipped over you like 2 or 3 times now today?
Never.
Okay, I will look at you next. All right. Have at.
I don't know if you've heard about a rezone and annexation that's happened. But anyway, it's a standard practice. There are no actual humans that live on this property. So it's not actually going to adjust the components of how the districts are apportioned, but we just have to do this as standard practice. If we don't do this, we have to create a special voting ward for a place that nobody lives. And we don't really want to do that. So as a way to like streamline elections, we've done this a couple of times in the last couple of years. It's best if we amend the maps to say this area that was formerly of Red Cedar is now in the city of Menominee. It's now part of City Council Ward 11 or Supervisory District 23, which is Supervisor Thomas's district. So
For some reason, Andrew doesn't want to be standing in a cornfield collecting votes that won't happen.
from the crows, right?
Yeah, I think there is one house.
There's one house, but it's not currently occupied and I was under the impression, okay, so if that's true, we would still amend the maps to add one additional human to the apportioned population. I was told that there was a house there, that there was nobody living in it. And with the proposal to not have housing there anymore, it wouldn't adjust but if you want me to change the numbers on the,
No.
okay. Any questions on that? All right.
Supervisor Bauer.
Could this proposal that they're coming after with the annexation not go through? Could it develop as a housing development down the road?
It could, if, yes. Now that this property is within the city of Menominee limits, it's up to the city council what they would want to do. They'd have to change the zoning again, right? Because right now it's zoned industrial. So, yeah, and through the zoning of industrial was the intent of not having housing there in the first place, which is why it wouldn't impact the population apportionment.
Well, and we, even if they do that, we're stuck changing our boundaries to match their boundaries
Right.
or Andrew's stuck out in the cornfield waiting for people to vote.
Yeah.
You like.
Okay, further questions? All right, all those in favor, oh, nope. Debate going once. I'm tired. Debate going twice. Okay, now we are ready to vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. What fun. Budget amendment. I would need a motion in a second. Supervisor Bauer, Supervisor Brock, no, I'm staring at you now.
Look up.
Okay. We might be a little bit punchy. Okay, so we have a motion in a second. Y'all know what these look like. Are there any clarifying questions? Seeing none, first option for debate. Supervisor Bauer. Second option for debate. Right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, we're good. On to item 8, review of reports, resolutions, and ordinances coming to the county boards and standing committees. Community resources and tourism, resolution recognizing SNAP staffing. These just go through. We aren't voting on them. Does anyone have any questions about that? All right. B, Judiciary and Law, Ordinance amending Chapter 7, Section 6 of County Ordinances, Fees 7.6.01, Sheriff's Office. And II, ordinance amending chapter 26, maintenance at Board of Prisoners. Does anyone have any questions on those items? Okay. C, planning, resources and development, ordinance amendment, rezone Witzel. Questions? You've all seen about 1 million of these. None. D, committee on administration. I, resolution to approve administrative policies. 1, budget amendments and adjustment. 2, job titles and descriptions. 3, salary administration. Does anyone have any questions on those? All right. That brings us to the end of item 8. We are on item 9, reports from standing committees. Oh, let's start over at this end. Supervisor Quinn, and microphone, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Real quick, the Planning and Resources Committee met last Wednesday on the 1st of the month, I think it was. We approved the rezone that we noted tonight, and then we had a discussion mostly on from the Register of Deeds, or the zoning administrator on some proposed zoning changes having to do with some ways to clarify the ADU ordinance, and then some suggestions on contractor storage yards and providing way to, if makes sense, provide them as a permitted use in various districts. It was suggested general ag would be one, and which was generally supported by the committee, and residential would be another, which was not generally supported by the committee. So those will all come back to us in the form of proposed ordinance changes that we'll review. That's all.
Thank you, Supervisor Quinn. Supervisor Wilsey.
Thank you. We met on the 18th of August. Nothing major to report. We just did a tour of the judicial center. So we did the DA, the judges, child services, and clerk of court. So it was neat to kind of see their workspace. We pushed our meeting back to the 5th Monday of this month, so we don't conflict with the Wisconsin Dells trip. So.
Thank you, Supervisor Wilsey. Supervisor Morehouse.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We met on August 21st, and it was a very long meeting. We had a required in statute public hearing on the DHS budget, which involved some sort of snafus. The material that had been, that was in our packet and that had been released to the public had changed by the time it came up on the screen in the meeting. So we had to do a little sort of quick stepping. Oh, this is what you have, but this is what it is. It was rather embarrassing, I think, for Paula Winter, and like not great to have happened. Anyway, we have been having a number of discussions, which I know everybody in the world thinks makes sense, about inspecting mobile home parks. Everybody is aware that there are often significant problems with sewage and water and, all of that. We've discussed it on a number of occasions, and we looked at cost figures and some of the ramifications of doing this. While it is a great idea, the county would essentially lose money if we kept our fees the same. If we double our fees, our license fees for mobile home parks, it's likely those fees would get passed on to the low-income renters, or that mobile home parks would simply refuse to participate. The net of all of this is that it's expensive, and it doesn't meet the health department's goals of trying to pay for those outward facing programs, and it's likely that it would increase homelessness as opposed to trying to address the problem. So anyway, we did that. We reviewed all 3 budgets. My decision not to approve them, knowing that they're pretty flexible. We did vouchers, and we did the budget adjustments that you see here, and we meet on the 26th.
Thank you Supervisor Morehouse. Supervisor Headland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our last meeting, Committee on Administration, took place Thursday, August 28th, here in room 60. We had 215 pages of information to review. And I'll start taking you through that. No, if you would like the condensed version.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, let's go with that.
Okay. Again, we had staff reports. We now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 reports that we get on a monthly basis from starting with our county manager, administration department, and all the way down through. Again, good reports. They're always timely. They're always there, and including where they land at that time according to their yearly budget. So we have a chance to review all that information ahead of time. We did have a representative from Kerber Rose with the audit, presented that. We did get an audit done in good standing, which is always good to hear. In other words, there was not any, concerns about the accuracy, basically, of the audit. We again looked at the budgets for health insurance, workers' comp, IT, corp, council, CJC, the clerk, libraries, and external organizations, and the treasurer. And did approve them up to that point. We also approved the administrative policies, again, the ones that we talked about, attendance, nepotism, recruitment, selection, a separation policy, timekeeping, hours of work and work schedule policies, and roles of management policy. And again, as you can see, we're moving forward much stronger with policy as opposed to ordinance, because policy can be more flexible and change. Our ordinance decisions on some of these things take 3 to 4 months before we get those changes made. If we have it by policy, much quicker. And not to take away anybody's thunder, but the end result is, if it involves money and such, it's still going to come down to the board. Along with that, again, some more policy changes, salary administration policy and so forth. And a budget amendment was accepted for CJCC and recommended, which you have all recommended. So our next meeting coming up is going to be September 25th at 3 p.m. room 60 right here.
Dan, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was just gonna add that a lot of those policies that were approved are part of the personnel ordinance that is going to vote next week. So if you were to make those changes, these policies make up for that. That there are some new ones, but that's a large portion of
It's a large portion of it, yeah. And if we don't, then we won't have a bunch of policy to approve.
Supervisor Prochnow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Highway met this morning. Field operations, we've been doing a lot of work for the townships. We've started the County Road D project, which is out by Jake's. We're hoping to have that blacktop somewhere in the first part of October. So that's been moving along, or we're going to move along pretty fast, hopefully, and get that done before snow. The other roads, County Road Y, double B, and G, we're waiting for the pavement markings. That's why the signs are still out there. The pavement markings got to be all put on yet. The County Road V, the bridge up there has been done, so now the road's open up by Connorsville. Annual bridge inspection was in July. We have 27 bridges that we have to have annually inspected. 14 for the county, 13 for the towns and villages. There was a couple of them that we had to put weight restrictions on them, which are never good, especially the one up by Sand Creek, which is a very agricultural heavy use farm, which we had to put 20-ton limit on. Which is gonna be replaced hopefully in 27, I believe. So just for a year and a half, we had to deal with that. Cedar Fall Bridge came back the same as last time, so we don't have to put any more rate restrictions on that. The good news is the limit for bridge replacement was at 5 million. They have increased that to 10 million. The Cedars Fall Bridge was gonna probably cost more than 5 million. So if we can get an 80-20 program on that, that's gonna save us a lot of money. Now that they raised that to 10 million for the federal program.
Excellent.
So that was good news. And there's no bad news. Next meeting is October 8th. So that's it. Thanks.
Supervisor Kinnear.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Committee for the Neighbors of Dunn County met August 25th. We found out that they're in the black, doing well, as we heard today. We possibly lose our CNA training program. They would like to start charging us for people that they can't fill a class. So if they only have 8 out of a 10 class, they want us to pay for those 2, and they want to do a few other things. We'll probably lose them. We're slowly increasing the number of residents, as we have one household that's not completely full. And as we get more and more staff, we get to put more residents in, and more residents mean more money. And Susan Wilson, I think you mentioned that or someone did, 27 years working in Dunn County. She's retired. So that's great. She was working at the Neighbors. And we meet again on the 23rd.
Thank you, Supervisor Kinnear. Supervisor Vogel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the Facilities Committee met on August 13th. We had to move it up because of the budget workshop. So we had a report from the fair and the fair board. The fair went well. There was some rain and some heat that caused a little bit of problems, and they had a successful auction. And then we were presented with financials from the fair board, which we don't often see. And so I don't think the costs are all in, but it looks like the county may have about $45,000 for the fair. So that's something we're going to continually keep an eye on. Then Austin gave us a great facilities and parks report. They had very positive feedback of all the work that facilities did. And then the LEAF, the lowering expenses across facilities program, is going well. So he saved money on air fresheners, and then he was scheduling thermostats. So that could save about $8,000 or more by just making sure we cool it down, or we don't have the heat going when no one's here, or the air conditioning going when no one's here. But then Caddywood Lawn windows were actually vandalized. So they have those boarded up, and they're looking into cameras to keep an eye on why that happened. And then we approved the budgets, and our next meeting is September 24th at 5 p.m.
Thank you, Supervisor Vogel. Supervisor Bauer.
Thank you. CRT met on August 9th. Christian Bruder, the UW Extension Director, shared that the Food Wise program is winding down. I mean, they're going to lose one on 1st October. So then they'll have the other 2 drop off as the months go along. Dunn County Economic Development secured a small business development grant. Dunn County has been recognized as a hub zone, which increases the chances of government funding. Dunn County Communications, Dan shared that Chris Corpola's video was one of the highest ever seen, over 60,000, I think, something like that. Yeah, really amazing. That's yeah. The Library Planning Committee will meet more often. We only met once, so we'll try to get meeting more in the beginning of the year to get ahead of the library funding. So that'll be coming up more. Our next meeting was going to be next week, but we moved it up to yesterday. So because UW Extension Director was going to go on vacation, but she wanted to get her budget in. So we went through the budget again a little bit more yesterday. She explained how it's really needed. Margaret Murphy had a real good